Alright guys, we're going to talk about it. Show of hands, how many people believe that we are surrounded by an ice wall and the earth is flat? Hopefully not very many of you guys, but this slideshow illustrates a point that many flat earthers believe: we're surrounded by an ice wall that the government won't let us pass. We can see multiple photos here, a break in the ice wall, and a model of this ice wall. First and foremost, debunking the ice wall, we've actually flown over the North and South Pole as early as 1926, courtesy of Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Additionally, all of these photos that people mistake for the ice wall are actually known as ice shelves, and they have to be attached to a landmass, aka Antarctica. Flat earthers themselves have even disproven this theory with this experiment. You have a camera 5 meters up, a person holding a light, 2 holes in the wall right here. If the earth is flat, you don't raise the light up to meet the camera lens, however, they had to raise it up because of the curve. It honestly blows my mind that people still believe in the flat earth theory, given there's so much contradicting evidence, but hey man, you do you.
What if I told you that none of us are from Earth? That the inner lands, the 7 continents we call home, are a prison intentionally populated by the descendants of those who once ruled the lands beyond the ice wall. We are not natives of the inner lands. Long before recorded history, when the explorer Richard Constantine discovered these 7 continents, discovered the lands within the ice wall, he orchestrated what has come to be known as the Great Placement. Constantine understood that control could not be maintained outside the wall in the ancestral lands. Civilizations beyond the ice wall grew too complex, too defiant, and too unpredictable. He realized with these untouched 7 continents, he could create a containment zone, an engineered world within the ice wall, designed to keep its inhabitants isolated, manipulated, and obedient. So, he devised a chilling plan: harvest embryos from the ancestral lands and populate the inner lands with carefully controlled, compliant humans. Richard would raise the first 2 embryos up into their adolescence, 1 boy, 1 girl, and then leave them to the wild to fend for themselves. This is where we get our Adam and Eve stories from. See, Richard wrote biblical stories about what he was doing with us, about how he was creating us. In these stories, he spoke of himself as this godlike figure, and he left these stories riddled around the 7 continents, knowing we'd eventually come to grasp what they meant. He knew we'd believe him. I'm going to go ahead and say this is a joke for entertainment purposes only.
So like I was saying, a lot of these Zeta Grays are coming from outside the ice wall, and a lot of these giants were created in the land of clones, right? So they was using them to basically break down the main barriers to get into Atlantis. And that's why a lot of these Antarctic ice wall, they have cracks in them, because these are the spots that they broke into to get through the wall. So along with these giants, they also created the wild men, and also other creatures like the dog men, the dog-headed men, and there was a bunch of different creatures that they were actually using to wage war against these walls, because there was no limit to how many different hybrid species the Zeta Grays were willing to create in order to sack Atlantis. So a lot of these werewolves and a lot of these wild men that came and attacked England, Italy, and Scotland during the fall of, also during the fall of Rome, were actually these hybridized beings that eventually broke through the wall and started waging war against the kingdoms of Atlantis. And this is why we had froze the ice wall, was to try to keep them out. But of course, the battle still ensued for them to gain access to our realm. So there were a lot of different species of animals that was already here, and what the Zeta Grays was doing was taking the hominid and merging their DNA with it, and also splicing other animal DNAs to create different types of hybridized species used for war. So a lot of these religions were used by the Zeta Grays to make the indigenous people forget our lineage and our customs and culture. These are also what you call like the frost gitans from Jotunheim from outside of the ice wall, which were used to also battle against the wall of Atlantis. All the Elohim who was sent to the ice wall was guaranteed to die. We were only sent there to give our people more time to go back to our realm, to come back with reinforcements to finish off the war that began at the wall.
Tribes beyond the ice wall part 2.1. Watch 2.2 to understand.
Yeah. Look at that. There. Now, before there were countries, before there were presidents, there was just the world, one big place. And in this place, there were fairies and there were humans. Now, the leaders of both kingdoms decided that no one side would rule the other, that the kingdoms would be equally divided between the two of them. But that didn't set well with Torok and some of the fairies. They wanted to control the world, so there was a great big war. Well, the good humans won, and the rebel fairies were condemned to darkness.
And Torok was turned into a troll.
For all eternity. Succeeded in transforming them all. A single fairy universe will be formed within this building. It'll be filled with all his old fairy pals. And when that's done, that universe will burst forth like a fourth dimension.
Don't have a head, and their facial features, where they should be, are on their torso. These are the only non-human, sapient, sentient entities that I've covered so far, and they're the main ones here on these islands. Zerzura is nicknamed God's Deception, and that's because of the factors that I just mentioned. The reality of things here is just not true. You could see one thing, but it's not actually occurring. There's things without heads walking around, and people in places that don't exist, and entire civilizations that you can't trust. It's a beautiful land, but a mysterious land. Gigantic and enigmatic mushrooms grow, and they have different effects in the environment and if you eat them, and it's just a whole ordeal. Continuing up and around the wall, we have reached the huge, massive landmass of Germania. Now, Germania is physically the second biggest continent, the whole thing together, that I'll be talking about today, and with it comes a share of eccentricities that are beyond weird. In Germania, everything comes in pairs, so every natural occurring thing has two of them. If there's mountains, there's two identical mountains. If there's creatures, there's two identical creatures. If there's plants, and so on and so you get it. Germania is also home to one of the only sentient, non-human beings in the entire Atlas world, and those are known as the Zwado beings. Now, these beings are known for their peaceful nature and their ability to reconcile with their enemies. They sort of look like hippo-elephant type creatures with short legs and long trunks off the front of their face. They also are known for their long tongues. They are extremely kind and social creatures, and despite the fact that they're not human, they can interact with humans pretty well. I find it kind of wholesome that in the lore, if you read it, these creatures they're sentient, so they think like humans do, sort of, and they try to do these daily tasks like live life, but they can't because they're kind of clunky and they have these long tusks and tendrils and stuff. So they oftentimes have to help each other out because they just love each other so much as a race, as a being. So they always help each other out doing these tasks, and I thought that was pretty wholesome. When the continent of Germania was first explored and first found many moons ago by the Spaniards that colonized it, these Zwado beings were almost wiped out through hunting to complete extinction. Germania is home to so many different ethnicities from our world, and it's all very specific.